You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for May 26th brings us Category 1 Cyclone Yaas, which is making landfall along the coast of India pretty much as we speak. On day 146 of the year so far, it's the biggest event going on, and I think that's going to keep us busy for the whole hour. It's the 26th storm of the year so far. In the Atlantic, no areas of interest. It's 6 days until the Atlantic hurricane season begins. Let's hope it stays quiet for as long as possible, even though we've already had a tropical storm. Looking towards the Eastern Pacific then, in a moment, there it goes. 2 areas of interest that we're still monitoring closely. Still late in the forecast period towards the end of the 5 days, so we're not sure on what's going to be going on with these two. Models are suggesting that trading places between one and the other being the strongest. And this is the Western Pacific. We've got the area of interest over the central part of Micronesia. We're giving that a 20% right now because of significant uncertainty. Models have wanted it to form for ages and taken it on and off and on and off, and we're not really sure what's going to happen with that just yet. Cyclone Yaas is in the Bay of Bengal. And there's a glitch down there, the bottom right hand corner. I'll just point that out for you. Yaas is about to make landfall as an 85 mile per hour Category 1 at least, and it's probably going to deliver huge amounts of rainfall and significant winds, of course, moving on shore, and a storm surge, a hefty storm surge. Atlantic satellite imagery looks like this right now, fairly quiet, very quiet actually, which is good. Really nothing to talk about in the open waters. So let's take a look at the Gulf of Mexico. Not much going on here either. You can see another system moving through the United States now. I imagine that might be giving a little bit of severe weather as well, just like we had yesterday. The Eastern Pacific looks like this, so you can see once again the tropical disturbances there. The first one, the one that's already out there, that might contribute to the first area of interest, but as far as I know, we've still not really got either of the two that we're watching marked out yet, so I think they're still yet to come from Central America. The Western Pacific is slow to load, but there it is. You can see the whole ocean there, and that disturbance, which there's not much of it at the moment, disturbance near the Micronesian islands. It will eventually parade towards the west and could be a long-range threat to the Philippines. We're going to have to watch that closely next week. The South Pacific, fairly quiet. There are rumblings about a potential system, subtropical system down there that we're still monitoring. We haven't completely called it off yet, but it's a low chance. North Indian Ocean, of course, features the main event today, the landfalling, as it would appear, Cyclone Yaas, which is near the top of your screen. And looking at sea surface temperatures, still fairly warm as you'd expect. Let's look at the Bay of Bengal there on the right hand side. Still warm temperatures, 31 pushing 32 degrees Celsius. The South China Sea also very warm. Those are the warmest places right now in tropical regions. The Philippine Sea also warming up as well. Pretty much unchanged from what we were seeing yesterday. These things change fairly slowly, but what you will be guaranteed of is that the warmness will continue to rise all across the tropical zones in the northern hemisphere as we reach the sea surface temperature peak, which tends to be around September. Sea surface temperature anomalies look like this. Really warm off the Chinese coast. So if there is a storm there later this year and it's still got that anomaly, that's quite substantial. The anomaly's decreasing a little bit along the Bay of Bengal coast, obviously under the influence of this storm. But elsewhere, pretty unchanged. There's actually a pretty cool pool over the Bahamas, which is interesting, and the Gulf Coast still below average, at least at this point. Let's hope it stays that way. Well, that's everything right now, and to discuss everything that's going on in the world of tropics right now is myself, Nathan Foy, hosting tonight, and our team consisting of David, Christian, Devon, Farhan, Jonesy, Noah, Xavier, and Mike. Good evening to all of you. How are you?
Good evening.
Very good.
Very well.
Evening.
Now, let's begin tonight with Farhan, because you've been watching this storm, of course, as you were last night. Of course, it's morning your time. What are your impressions as you wake up to see Yas making landfall? I think the biggest question is its intensity.
Well, yeah, of course, there are a lot of uncertainty regarding the storm's intensity due to its monsoonal nature and origin. There is a question whether it's even a tropical cyclone to begin with during its early days, but it is now unquestionably a tropical cyclone, and although perhaps it's not the most powerful tropical cyclone in the world, especially compared with Taute, it is certainly still a huge threat to the coast as it is making landfall currently with landfall probably being called by both us and the Indian Meteorological Department within the next 1 hour or two. Of course, the good thing is that the Indian government have called off evacuation and preparation measures. Close to 1 million people have been evacuated, which is good to minimize casualties. Although the unfortunate news is that we already have two confirmed fatalities, which is sad and tragic, of course. But there's nothing we could really do about it now. System is making landfall. The only thing we could hope is that it doesn't go up much too higher.
Yes, indeed. Although, I mean, there's not much people can do at this point regarding controlling that. But the main threats to land right now, what would you say that they are? Xavier, you're also with us tonight. Your thoughts on the storm and its threats?
Yeah, North Indian Ocean cyclone season has definitely been off to a very interesting start. We had Taute not even 2 weeks ago, and now here we are with Yas. So it has definitely not been too much of a relief for India as a whole. We had the west coast of India being affected by Taute. Now we have the eastern section of India being affected by this storm. Thankfully, it's nowhere near as strong as Taute was. It's still a very formidable cyclone. It's still got 85-mile-an-hour winds by our analysis. So it's definitely not something to take lightly, of course, especially with those winds. And of course, we're looking at flooding being a very significant factor as well due to both the movement and the size of this storm. So those there, especially in Odisha and West Bengal, should be making sure that any preparations that have not been completed already need to be completed basically ASAP, basically yesterday. So hopefully you have prepared if you are in this storm's path. Hopefully you have enough food to last 2 weeks in the event you lose power, because this is definitely something that could happen with this cyclone. So we are now approaching landfall. Landfall really imminent at this point, within the next hour at the most. So hopefully everyone has done what they have needed to do. As Farhan mentioned, I believe 1 million people have evacuated in preparation for Yas. So thankfully, they did make the right choice in terms of making sure that they kept themselves safe and prepared for the storm.
Now, Devon is also here, our lead cyclone analyst operationally. I think you're monitoring this on radar as well. What's that showing? We don't have imagery of that just here.
So yeah, the radar signature has really been back and forth all day, to be quite honest. There was a time earlier this morning on the East Coast where it looked like that the storm was developing a pinhole eye and it looked like it was about to take off. It was underneath an upper level anticyclone, and then there were some curved bands that developed on radar that started developing around the pinhole eye that tried to form. And then pretty much after that structure happened, the whole core just fell apart.
Right.
So it just was not able to get itself together at all. You can see kind of the remnants of that. Of course, this may not be the greatest showing because the eye is currently heavily shielded from the torrential downpours that are coming down between the radar and the center of the storm. So we really can't resolve the eye, and unfortunately the Kolkata radar isn't much better due to distance reasons. So
Yep.
unfortunately, we really don't have a good idea as to how strong this storm is. There is a lot of uncertainty. There hasn't been a solid scatterometer hit of this storm. And the last buoy observation that we got solidly was about 12 hours ago. And we've been pretty much holding.
We've just about lost the signal there. I was going to lead on with more questions in a moment.
A little bit like the velocity. Yeah. Have I come back? Hello?
We had this problem yesterday. I think we've got you back now, Devon.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Barely.
What I'm saying is that on velocity, the velocity signatures on the radar have not decreased since earlier today. So we haven't opted to go with a weakening of the storm either. We're pretty much holding it at its intensity, despite the not very good looking appearance on radar. And honestly, it's not looking the greatest on satellite anymore either. Before earlier today, it looked like it was really trying to get an eye formed, and it luckily it just couldn't get it done.
Yeah, there is that, but massive flare-ups of convection right now. Satellite estimated rain rates are through the roof. Is that translating to the ground, do you think? Is there cause for concern, especially?
Well, I think that I have pretty high confidence in the rain predictions. We did expect that there was going to be very torrential rainfall, especially right along the landfall region of the coast. Again, expecting at least 350, if not 400 millimeters of rain, around 15 inches of rain. So absolutely, we're expecting torrential downpours, flash flooding in urban and low-lying areas. When we're talking about these types of rain rates. Absolutely. It is a cause for concern. Flash flooding will be a problem. I think a more significant problem will be coastal flooding due to storm surge, but with 1 million people evacuating, that's certainly a good sign. That means people are getting out of the way of the water of this storm. And I still strongly think that the wind threat is definitely the least of the three threats when it comes to this. It's pretty much going to be all carried out by either the flash flooding from torrential rainfall or from the coastal flooding due to the large amounts of storm surge that's expected to come along. The Yas is a very large cyclone, as I stated yesterday, and it hasn't gotten any smaller. So it's going to be pushing a lot of water into a river delta, which is a very low-lying area, and we could very easily see storm surges for the entire river delta. It's not just going to be limited to the landfall area. We're talking about all the way to the Bangladesh-Myanmar border. We're going to be seeing storm surges of at least a measurable amount.
Now, the IMD is saying that the storm surge in the worst affected place could reach 4.7 meters, Devon.
It's not surprising whatsoever. Again, Yas is a very large system, and when it comes to storm surge, it's not necessarily the strength of the system. It's actually a lot more dependent on how large the system is. And this is quite the gargantuan system. When we're talking the gale force winds extending out almost 250 miles away from the center to the north and east of it, at least when it was entirely over water. That is a very significant radius. That is a very large storm. That's going to be able to push a lot of water, and 75 knot, 85 mile an hour winds. That's not a pushover either. So that's going to also contribute a little bit less to these storms.
All right, we just about we just about got the end of that, Devon, but you're fading out once again. I wonder if, Noah, you have any comments on the storm regarding its strength. 85 miles per hour is what we've gone with and have been going with for a little while. Is that something you would agree with?
I personally have the storm at around 80, looking at the rate of velocities, but generally the intensity is pretty uncertain, with pretty weird things going on at the storm's core, and the storm being pretty much sheared. So we have a pretty uncertain intensity estimate. So 80, 85 miles per hour, anything around there is probably good.
Mm-hmm. And as always, tonight you can send in your messages to us. Start your message with Force 13, all in text, on the air in the chat section, and we can take your comments in real time. For instance, North America asks, could there be any brown ocean effect with Cyclone Yas?
No, nothing like that is expected. For the viewers that may not know what the brown ocean effect is, that's pretty much where a storm weakens at a much slower rate than one would anticipate when moving over land, or potentially even strengthens over land due to a high soil moisture content. Although there is a river delta right next to the storm, all models indicate a pretty standard inland dissipation rate for Cyclone Yas. I would not expect any significant brown ocean effect with this storm.
From what I did see, though, significant rainfall numbers could extend far inland. That's what we were looking at last night.
How significant are we talking about here? Because, like I said, with the landfall...
We were talking 100 millimeters up to the foothills of the Himalayas.
Okay, yeah. So, well, 100 millimeters, yeah. So that could definitely get quite significant. Of course, the rainfall maximum, I think, is still going to be relegated to the landfall area. But yeah, 100 millimeters of rainfall can definitely extend over a very wide area for a storm as large as this one. That makes sense.
And we're looking at the imagery on, I think, Christian's screen right now, showing us the Himawari 8, actually, that one is. Now, I should mention something regarding this, because we're looking at, on the Himawari 8 satellite, which you'll see sometimes, and you've got the INSAT and Meteosat satellites, but with the Himawari, it's not far from the edge of the coverage. We've determined that what we're seeing in the clouds here is actually 40 miles further east than what is portrayed on this imagery because of the angle, the viewing angle.
Yes.
So it looks like on the Himawari imagery that it's quite significantly inland. Move it 40 miles east, we're pretty much looking at on the coast. On that subject, do any of us think it's made landfall yet?
Looking at the radar velocity signatures, it's definitely not made landfall yet. It looks like that it's still got a bit to go.
Alright.
There we go. This imagery should be slightly better.
I can also agree with that, saying it's not made landfall yet. Most of the models and the IMD and JTWC actually expect it to make a little bit of a just a little north turn, and then come into land around 6Z. The IMD has come out and said on Twitter that they expect a landfall around noon. However, I think they underestimated it. I honestly think that we're seeing landfall. If it's not occurring now, it's going to be occurring within the next hour or two.
We think it's going to be that soon? Are we sure?
I wouldn't be so sure about a landfall that soon. I think somewhere in the range of 3 to 6 hours is appropriate. I mean, when you're talking about this storm taking a little bit of a northward jog and the fact that it's not moving particularly quickly, it's probably gonna meander for a little bit before finally settling ashore.
And there is that inlet there that it looks like it's entering, so...
But Devin, the radius of maximum winds is already on shore, isn't it?
Oh yes, the radius of maximum winds is definitely on shore. That I can agree with. That is definitely on shore. The landfall isn't when the radius of maximum winds comes ashore. That's considered to just be a direct hit. The Landfall is when the center of circulation actually crosses over land, and that's not going to happen for at least, I think, for a couple more hours.
Yes, but from a ground perspective, it doesn't really make much difference damage-wise.
No, it's not going to make much difference damage-wise. Even if the landfall is extended out 3 or 6 hours, it doesn't look like that this storm's really strengthening any, because like I said, it tried to ramp up intensity quickly, and the structure basically just collapsed on itself, and it's been reeling back ever since then. So I wouldn't think that it being over water longer is going to significantly change the intensity of the storm at all.
Well, let me
Alright.
ask you this, Devin, because I was looking at the JTWC cone. They actually have it weakening down to a strong tropical storm at landfall. Do you think that it's going to hold its cyclone status, or do you think it's going to go down to a strong tropical storm?
So basically, we're going to be holding our intensity at 75 knots unless we get significant observations that show otherwise. And once we get the storm inland, we'll just follow a normal inland dissipation curve, and slowly degrade the winds that way. So I don't think that if it is going to weaken, it's not going to be by much. The JTWC does have the storm weaker than us, it should be noted. The JTWC, I believe, has it at exactly 75 miles an hour, right on the borderline of Category 1. So that's the JTWC estimate. The idea that it loses 5 miles an hour from now until landfall, it's within the realm of possibility, but honestly, plus or minus 5 or maybe even 10 miles an hour is honestly within the realm of error with the intensity of this storm. Because we haven't, like I said, we haven't had any scatterometer data. Gathering wind data from overland sources has been difficult. So trying to get a really good intensity estimate of this system, it's been a struggle, to say the least, especially today. It's been a struggle. So pretty much what we're going to do is hold the intensity unless we get some sort of significant reasoning that says, hey, we just got this scatterometer pass that shows that the storm's only 60 miles an hour. We'll degrade 60 miles an hour, reanalyze the radar data, and then see how quickly the storm actually fell off as it got closer to land.
All right, we've got tons more questions to go through here, Devon. So I'll just throw these on our plate. Is there any mountains in the path of this storm?
I believe there are some mountains to the west of the storm that can cause some significant convergence and actually add on to the rainfall totals. That's actually where we're expected the most significant rainfall to be. I'm not aware of how high those mountains go, or how steep the terrain is, unfortunately. I like to look at it, but there is some higher elevations to the west of the landfall area.
Your signal just about survived that. More questions. What's the highest storm surge expected from Yas? From what we saw in the IMD saying it could be up to 4.7 meters.
Yep, that is what I have seen the IMD say, and that's actually what I had up on my screen, and everyone saw on the stream earlier. 4.7 is the highest that they are currently predicting, and that will be for Balashwar in Odisha.
Does anybody know what the storm surge for last year's storm was?
Ampon?
Ampon?
Yeah, Ampon. What was the storm surge for Ampon?
No idea. We'll see if any of our Our team are going to
If
turn
anybody
researcher
knows
there.
Up to 16 feet.
How many?
Up to 16 feet.
16 feet. Up to 16 feet. So yeah, 4.7 meters. That's right. That's pretty much right on par with storm surge from Ompon, which again is not
Absolutely.
surprising. Ompon was a stronger system, but this is significantly larger. So there you go.
Bobby
And
says,
another-
I've seen the live hurricane stream showing rapid intensification is possible. Is there still a chance, or is it now 0? It's definitely now 0.
Yeah, the storm's too close to land right now to do to start
description
doing.
The
will-
radars.
Yeah.
Yeah, the radar signature showing no indication that an eye is there. The central core is not tightening. I would rule out rapid intensification at this point. If anything, gradual weakening.
And there's also 25 knots of easterly shear, so that's another thing.
And we also had a report that it's quite gusty in Kolkata right now. If you have observations on the ground by any chance, do send them in as well through our tag, because that information could be useful not just for us reporting it, but for other people on the ground in the area and beyond. Devon, I cut across you there because your signal was poor again. What were you trying to say? Oh,
I'm trying to regather my thoughts here.
sorry about
My
that.
signal's about to cut out again.
Yep, there it
Yeah.
goes.
I see a question in the chat. How large is Cyclone Yas? And I have up currently the radius of the winds according to the JTWC. And if you would like to bring
Yeah,
them up,
we
or
got
do you
it.
want me to read them off?
So you can see there 155 nautical miles northeast quadrant, so that relates to about, it's over 300 kilometers. And the other distances, the other quadrants, not far behind. Considering that the storm is only, the center of the storm is probably about 50 kilometers offshore at most, then that's a pretty large area that's going to be getting those strong winds.
The cyclone winds are currently 15 nautical miles in the northeast, 25 nautical miles in both the southeast and southwest, and 15 nautical miles in the northwest. So compared to the tropical storm winds, much smaller, which is to be expected. So the main wind damage will be around the landfall area. However, wind damage could happen anywhere that receives any of these winds.
Well, yes, particularly in a storm like this, where we, it's not going to deliver 300 kilometer per hour winds, but it's going to deliver a widespread areas of still damaging. How much? 60 kilometer per hour winds, gale force winds, and above, over very large areas. In a few moments, we'll take a look at the models around the world, as we do on, it's becoming a routine now, on our Tropical Weather Bulletin live, and then we'll see where we are at the end of that. But any further comments from our team on Yas right now?
While looking at conditions here, I have a video from how do you pronounce this place? Diga in West Bengal. This is from 20 minutes ago. If the Twitter description is to be believed, the conditions are, well, from visually at least, it does look like it's tropical storm force condition winds as well as rain.
Given that it's only 6 in the morning there, it must be very recent.
As you can see there, conditions are deteriorating on shore.
Yeah, a bit glitchy, but you get the idea of what we're seeing there. Overcast, visibility probably poor. trying to make out the. Hard to tell what the waves
Well,
are
this
like
is
there as
this
well.
is right on the shore. This is right on the beach. So I guess the fact that you can't really see the ocean sort of tells you how bad the visibility is.
Of course, just trying to look at those waves there as well, but we don't really get a proper view. But that's an idea of what's going on there right now. More questions. What were the Fujiwara scale of the tornadoes spawned by Yas? Now that does need a mention, doesn't it? Because we were talking about this off air just
Yes,
before we started tonight.
Yes, it does. So earlier today, and I'm gonna correct the person asking the question, the Fujita scale, the Fujiwara,
Yes,
is
thinking
something completely different. That's for
it's
tropical
easy to
cyclones.
confuse.
They are very easy to confuse. They start with the same letter. But with the Fujita scale, I'm pretty sure the IMD has not gone out yet and checked, especially with this system bearing down. We probably won't have a general idea on what the F rating is going to be on it until sometime after Yas passes. I know I saw 2 people were electrocuted in one town and died. That is what the reports are. Unfortunately, Yas is already a deadly system, and 40 houses were destroyed from the tornado that lasted a minute and a half in another town. So when you're hearing homes destroyed, you're thinking it's going to be around, because we don't have visual photos of it yet. You're in your mind, you're thinking F1, F2 damage, but we have to wait until after Yas passes and for the IMD to get out there, and they'll officially rate it. And it's going to be on the Fujita scale, not the enhanced Fujita scale. Only 2 places in the world use the EF scale, and that's the United States and Canada. Everybody else still uses the Fujita scale.
Fascinating indeed. Let me see if there's anything else just to talk about here. All right, no, let's go straight to the latest model runs then, or at least what the GFS output is from the 18Z run. I've had a little look. I don't think it's that exciting tonight, but maybe we'll be unpleasantly surprised. So here we are right now. This is the big picture, and we take a look at the wind profiles around the world. You can see there lots of, in fact, the whole of Nova Scotia there, and most of Newfoundland is surrounded by gale force winds from an extratropical cyclone, if indeed it is actually a cyclone. So very interesting up there in the North Atlantic, but you can see over the main part of the Atlantic it is pretty dead. These light blue colors, translucent blues, showing those very low wind speeds up to about 25 miles per hour in the open ocean. That's really quite normal. And even down here you've got gusty winds off the coast of Colombia and Venezuela, but that is also fairly normal. Extending into the eastern Pacific then, well, I should show you the actual run. So over the next 7 days we can see how the Atlantic develops, and as you can see, a few more systems on the US East Coast, but not tropical, and there's nothing happening there. That's good. The Eastern Pacific then, let's take a little look. There's actually, it looks like it might be getting a little funny idea with this little thing over here, but that's not going to become anything. What is, though, is these 2 systems that come behind it. So let's try and see if we can trace it back. So actually, I think we can trace system number 1 to something that already is active, and that's this here. That's right now. And as you see, over the next few days, here we are getting towards, where are we, day 4, or just about the end of day 3. That goes this way and becomes this. That's a tropical cyclone, and behind it another one. GFS and other models have been consistent on this. There's good confidence that at least one of these will form, and if you saw our last tropical weather bulletin, I think it was the west one that was strongest. Now it's the eastern one, and it's going for Category 1 there. Tiny, but nearly 80 miles per hour on day 7.
It is what we are to be expecting now that we are in Eastern Pacific hurricane season. You start to see those waves come out and start developing into the Eastern Pacific towards late May, early June. In some years, of course, some years like 2019, we don't usually see those. But of course, we're not as hostile season that we shouldn't be seeing as much of a hurricane minority as we saw last year.
And quite often you get trains of hurricanes that come through in the Eastern Pacific. Let's look at the West Pac. You just saw the Central Pacific there. There's nothing there. The Western Pacific now is still a curious situation. There's still the potential, little area here near the Philippines that we're watching will probably develop a very shallow circulation very briefly there on day 2. But I don't think that's going to become anything. And what does is something that's located around here is where most of the energy is, moving westwards, and you'll see it take form. There it is, and that's after it passes south of Guam, well south, and is actually not far from Palau, which is located here, and the storm center. That's if the model's correct. And then later on in the run there, look at that, 2 typhoons forming towards the day 7 period. The second one there, not far from Guam, but not quite tropical storm conditions, and the first one could go on to affect the Philippines. But that is some way off, and so far the GFS has been very inconsistent with the end game of that in the Western Pacific. Now look at this mess, North Indian Ocean, and it's baffling really to see the amount of tropical storm force winds there highlighted in green, extending from the storm obviously, which is easy to spot, extending from it all the way south to the same latitude as Sri Lanka. That is some distance. I'm trying to figure out how much that is. So south of the storm center, there are actually, in a few areas, tropical storm force winds not fully related to the storm. That's why it's not listed on JTWC or anything, but because of the monsoonal stuff that it's attached to. Probably about 1,400 miles, or a little bit less, 1,200 miles of tropical storm force winds if you draw a line from south to north there. Remarkable.
Well, the monsoon season is going to be starting around June, mid-June, in a few weeks. So I suppose it's kind of expected for the people in India to start seeing those patterns and getting frequent bouts of heavy rain since the monsoon season is starting.
All right, so there it goes. Yas, of course, inland. Now, GFS 18Z wants the landfall to occur, if this means anything to anyone. Because it might be outdated already, but wants the landfall to be at around, what's that? We're looking at about 4 a.m. UTC, based on that latest run.
That would be about 3 to 4 hours, pretty much. That's what Devin did mention earlier.
Yep, and then moving inland, retaining tropical storm force winds for quite a while, actually, according to this. And then off it goes. We'll get the rain estimates soon. That's going to be more important. Now let's take a look at what should be a rather quiet South Indian Ocean. But of course, the answer's never that clear, is it? Because towards the end of the 7-day period, what do we have here? A tropical cyclone developing, quite a big one, with tropical storm force winds. And this has been on the models for quite a while. Really scruffy. Maybe not even fully tropical.
Oh, I've been paying attention to this model development a lot over the lunch break. So, it's not the only the GFS. So this is the GFS that's being displayed right now, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that means they've tried to zoom in. So this is yet another inconsistency that's been made by them then, because when I'm looking at that model during the 6Z or 12Z models, they displayed a Cat 3 while it crossed to the Australian region in June. So obviously that it's definitely not the time for that anymore. Obviously, now that we are pretty much past both of their seasons respectively. The Canadian model also development. The European didn't attach on, so I think we gave it a 30 or 40% chance of development.
Really?
I think that. Yeah, there definitely is a model support. I haven't looked at the 18Z models completely yet, as I've been busy, and of course, with this tropical weather bulletin here. But I'll be looking into it, and then of course figuring out what it will be. But I think there is some potential here. It's definitely not the time to write off the Southwest Indian Ocean yet, because it looks like it definitely has one less surprise they'll try to push out. I mean, we did have 90S and 91S at the beginning of the month, so guess it's not over yet.
Just an interesting feature, not tropical, that I wanted to point out down here. I believe it was in this model run. Very interesting cyclone forming there, which tries to get subtropical characteristics down there, way south of Madagascar. It doesn't look like it manages it, and then it really blows up to hurricane force, and off it goes. So that's an interesting little feature to look at there. Now looking towards the South Pacific, where we've been talking about this another mess here, which is currently with hurricane force winds off the coast of New Zealand, but the winds there on land have subsided. Still a chance that this could become a subtropical cyclone, and there's such mess all around it as well. Other systems trying to form off it. You see it moving through around there. This is probably where its best chance will be if it gets it. As it makes that bend, moving up towards the northeast. It's gone by that point, but I think, Devon, you've been watching that.
Yeah, I've been watching it kind of with a long eye over the past couple of days. I mean, this has always been a long shot to become a subtropical system, but it's never been a zero chance. So it's kind of just it's sort of hanging on as an area of interest, and then it's not. We were expecting this huge frontal boundary to get associated with it. So it's going to go through its second occlusion process here as a non-tropical low. And it's going to have a very, very narrow time frame. Like if this becomes a subtropical storm, it's only going to be subtropical for 6 hours tops, if that.
Have you looked to its east, though? Take a look at this. Extratropical, I know, but it is absolutely huge. Look at that thing go. That is unbelievable.
Yes. There are some powerful extratropical lows in the southern hemisphere, let me tell you.
That is really big. Probably about as big as Australia.
Yeah. Crazy.
There was one other thing, and there is a little thing coming off the South Atlantic in the late period towards day 7. Shouldn't be anything, but you know what it's like.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, I always, because of the weird subtropical train that we've had here in the South Atlantic recently, I've just been just a far eye to see if anything's going to happen. There was recently a very powerful low that came off of the South American coastline that looked like that it could have a chance to become subtropical, but then all of the models basically took it due south way before it would be able to attain subtropical status, and that's going to kill the low pretty quickly. So that materialized into nothing, but a very pretty looking system to say the least.
It's not impossible to get tropical systems down there. I mean, we've had one confirmed already this season, and that was by NOAA, by the National Oceanic. I don't know the rest of the act.
Yeah,
the rest
the
of the
National
meaning.
Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Yeah. Well, we had that one. We had the second one that was tracked by us that was alive for a couple of days. Honestly, looked better than Anna did during its entire lifespan.
Wow, I'm not sure about that.
No, I'm pretty sure about that. Anna was a naked swirl for 90% of its life.
For a
At
lot of
least
time.
Anna looked better than what Brazil called Portira down there in the
You were not going to talk
Atlantic
about
this
that
year.
front. Yeah, we're not
Alright.
going to talk about that
Alright.
front.
Just to
And then there's
go on.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
I was
just
going to say there's also man. Go ahead, Nathan.
Okay. Just to finish up the models regarding precipitation, because that's quite important. This is the GFS forecast from this point forward, so it doesn't factor in all of the rain that's already fallen in the area. And actually, Devon, I think that's trended up beyond the landfall zone at least. But at the landfall zone, we're talking still another 13 inches potentially, which is pushing, is that 400 millimeters? And over 300, I think. And further north, all the yellows there, that's the 4-inch threshold, which is 100 millimeters, and some oranges extending well inland up towards the Himalayan mountains, 6 inches way over there, 7 and 8 even inland in some parts of northeastern India there. I'm not as familiar, in fact, I'm barely familiar at all with that area, so I'm not sure if there are major cities there. I think we're looking at just getting some stuff up here. Patna perhaps could get some substantial rainfall, but I think that yeah, that could be. But that's 8 inches there, and then down here towards the landfall zone again, there's high numbers. Looking down towards, again, this whole area here south of Indonesia, along the coast of Indonesia in the southern hemisphere, from these potential next tropical cyclone, huge amounts of rain. Looking towards the West Pacific, a lot of areas there out at sea that are going to get substantial rainfall amounts. Nothing much to talk about on land just yet. Eastern Pacific, just the same. That system that might form could deliver, according to this, 39 inches of rain at one location out at sea. And in the Atlantic, pretty quiet.
Yeah.
So that's the
that's actually pretty typical for tropical cyclones to dump 30, 40, 50, 60 inches out at sea. It's happened before. There have been cases, of course, we've seen tropical cyclones dump over 100 inches over land. That's barely above sea level, so it basically counts it as ocean. Land significantly drops the precipitation rate, so seeing rainfalls of well over 30 inches over water, even if it's a weak system, that's actually not that unprecedented at all.
And I think we're going to go to Jonesy here as well, as shows the HWRF's take on the rainfall estimates. We showed this briefly earlier without describing it.
So this is the HWRF rain swath estimates. As you can see, the more defined yellow, so like right here, that's your 4 to 8. The lighter shade of yellow, that's more like a yellowish green, that's your 8 to 16. You have these two circles right here inland and actually two little ones right there going up towards the mountains of 16 to 24. I think my cursor, the end of it, I see a little tiny area of 24 to 32. So you're talking about very, very heavy rain. If it's up to 16 inches, that's 400 millimeters. Up to 24, you're talking upwards of 800 millimeters, 600 millimeter plus. So very, very heavy rain is going to be falling in these areas. And as the model you showed, Nathan, up here in the Himalayas, I'm seeing 4 to 8s, some spots of 8 to 16s as well. So the Himalayas are also going to get some nice rainfall from Cyclone Yas.
I just want to go ahead and state that the HWRF usually over forecasts rainfall by a very significant amount. Usually it over forecasts it by almost twice as much.
Yeah, those numbers are really high, what we're looking at there.
So I would say if you're going to take a look at the HWRF, it should be noted if the HWRF is showing 30 inches of rainfall, I mean, that's pretty much right in line with our predictions. When you just go ahead and cut that down by 2, you realize, oh, that's about 15, 16 inches. That's pretty much what we're running with.
What
in
both
terms
models
of
are showing, though, Devon, is a significant secondary line of rain or something like that, or a line of rain accumulations over Bangladesh as well.
That is interesting. On the eastern side of the storm, where all the wind shear is.
Yes.
That is very interesting. I wouldn't
I
have expected that.
mean, Devin, we had a big MCS there a few days ago that probably dumped a hell of a lot of rain. So
Yeah,
probably just some MCS type thing.
Okay. Okay, so maybe it's not associated with the storm, it's associated with something else, is what you're saying?
Possibly.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if that's necessarily associated with the storm because the wind shear is basically coming from that direction. And what that wind shear does is that's basically going to put an axe to any sort of significant tropical rainfall getting up that way, at least in association of the system. Again, there will be storm surge effects because that's just how these storms work. But I wasn't thinking there would be a lot of rainfall, but if there's going to be another non-tropical entity that causes rainfall there, I assume that would be normal with the monsoonal rain. You can correct me if I'm wrong there, but I would assume that would be sort of normal.
Yeah.
I just lost track of what I was going to say. Go ahead.
The latest APCF has come out for 0Z. They are the exact same, at least wind speed and pressure wise, with their 18Z.
Yeah.
Estimates 65 knots and 974 pressure. The location is at 21.1 degrees north and 87.4 degrees east.
Now, Devon, have you been looking at radar the whole time? And is there anything new that's happened in the last 50 minutes that we've been on the air?
I've not been looking at radar the whole time. I'll need to go ahead and pull it up.
Well, Josie's having a look right now, so you can tell us instead. At least
let me go ahead and look at Jonesy then.
Yeah, I was
see
prepared
here.
for that.
I haven't looked at radar in about, I would say, an hour.
It still looks pretty clear
since
that
I
it's
came
not on
on
land.
Stream. Yeah. I'm just getting circles of death.
Oh.
Nathan?
Yes, David, go ahead.
Before the show finishes, can you bring up your GFS model and have a look at the Southwest Pacific region?
We have taken a look at it, David. It's very interesting.
What about the Southwest Pacific?
I'm looking at something around 9 South 165.
9 South 165 West or 165 East?
165 East. I'm just wondering if there's anything showing up on your model.
I don't think there would be anything.
Not the South Pacific one. This is.
I see it. That's interesting.
Yeah, the BI's got it at 1,007 millibars, reaching 20 to 30 knots within 60 nautical miles of the low.
We weren't really prepared for this, but let's try and get an image of that from the Himawari 8 satellite. You can, I don't have the telestration on this, but you can see the areas that are on the southern side of the equator there. And I think the one that we're referencing would be it's along that line, but it doesn't look much on satellite right now, and and it's got 6 hours, so that's not going to become anything.
Back to the radar real quick. I'm not sure, Devin, if
Yeah.
you were having it up yet, but I know India was saying they expect the landfall to be not directly at Velasur, but near it, and I can show you actually. That would be right over here, where my mouse is now.
Yeah.
So this is still definitely offshore. We'll just have to wait and see when this does decide to make its landfall.
Velocities will cross-confirm that that's definitely still offshore. As far as structure-wise, I'm not seeing any significant up or down trend in this storm. It just pretty much looks the same that it was before. Again, it's really difficult to tell anything because of the very heavy rainfall between the radar site itself and the core of the storm. And the radar's having a really tough time making out the core of it. If we go over to the Kolkata radar, again, it's really not much better because the storm is quite a bit away from the radar. So you really, really can't make out much. Just some bands, that's about it. But even from that radar, you can kind of see the edge of the core there. It's definitely still offshore.
And yeah,
and again, no significant improvements.
And I think if the storm goes anywhere intensity-wise from here on out, it will be gradual weakening up to landfall if it changes at all. Because I mean, the structure on radar is really, really poor.
Yeah, it ain't getting anywhere.
It's not that pretty, but still, there's the rain, there's the wind, and there's the storm surge of, with the IMD saying 4.7 meters. I would not be surprised if there's any isolated areas of up to 5 meters due to it being a full moon and a special kind of full moon as well.
All right, on that note, it's time for us to end here. You can stay up to date in real time live on the Force 13 tracker with all of the storm activity, not just this right now, but future storms as well, anywhere around the world. And of course, you can join our community on our Discord server, discord.gg/Force13. I'm not sure what's going to happen tomorrow's Tropical Weather Bulletin because I'm not here. I think there's going to be an update on this storm tonight in the next couple of hours, I think. Xavier, that right?
Yeah, Ami is making that update, so that should be released within the next 2 hours.
So that's going to be another update around about landfall time. So stay tuned for that. Now let's finish up with our On This Day feature. So, what happened on this day? It was May 26, 1958, when there was a tropical storm active in the Atlantic that was not named. It was found in labeled in post-analysis, and Typhoon Phyllis was a Category 4, a very powerful one at low latitude in the open western Pacific near Micronesia, and would become a Category 5 in the next 24 hours. So that was a pretty remarkable thing to see on this day in 1958. Quite a few other ones as well, but they've already slipped my mind. I think in 1981 there was a Category 1 in the Southern Hemisphere, by the way. Anyway, it's May 26, 2021, day 146 of the year so far. The next name on the Atlantic naming list is Bill, followed by Claudette. In the Eastern Pacific, it's Blanca, followed by Carlos. In the Central Pacific, on list 1, it's Hone. In the Westpac, the next name on list 4 is Choi Wan, followed by Koguma. In the North Indian Ocean, it's Gulab, followed by Shaheen. And looking towards the Southern Hemisphere, once it catches up with me, the Southwest Indian Ocean, the next name there will be Kanga. The Australian region will be seeing Paddy, possibly sooner rather than later with that model run. And in the South Pacific, Cody is next on the list. That's all for now. Have a good night. We'll be back again tomorrow night. I think, in some form.